There is something within each of us that evokes a deep, almost instinctive repulsion when we observe it in others. Perhaps it's their unrestrained ambition, stripping away all mass of decorum, or their wild, untamed creativity, ignoring all boundaries and rules. Or perhaps it's their frightening spontaneity, unafraid of judgment, and living by its own unique laws. We wince, turn away, and whisper words of condemnation to ourselves. Too much, inappropriate, dangerous. And in this internal friction, this involuntary judgment, lies a paradoxical, almost scandalous truth. What we so vehemently denounce in others is often merely a distorted reflection of our own carefully buried gifts. Imagine that your so-called dark side, which you've come to see as a collection of flaws, vices, and all things shameful, is not actually a prison for exiled monsters, but a carefully sealed vault. A vault where, for centuries, generations, and then by you personally, the most powerful, most primal manifestations of your strength have been locked away. This isn't a landfill for the soul's waste, but fertile, untouched ground, capable of yielding unprecedented harvests of talent, energy, and genuine freedom. Every quality that causes internal protest in you is not a curse, but a pointer to a treasure trove where your true, as yet unmanifested resources lie dormant. It is in this deep, sometimes painful irritation, in this unwillingness to acknowledge certain facets of reality, both external and internal, that the key to understanding your own potential lies. Because what we suppress, what we push into the farthest corners of the subconscious, does not disappear without a trace. It merely changes form, transforming from potential strength into a hidden reaction, an invisible anchor holding us back from the fullness of being. And here arises a question demanding utmost honesty. When and under what circumstances were these powerful, life-affirming aspects of your essence first banished from the light of consciousness, transforming into what you now prefer to call your shadow? We spoke of the shadow not as a repository of vices, but as a hidden vault of primal forces, of sealed gifts whose untamed manifestation in others merely mirrors our own suppressed aspects. But why were these powerful, life-affirming beginnings banished from the light of consciousness? Why did they turn into a whisper, a shadow, something we shy away from? The answer lies in the deep, sometimes almost imperceptible, yet invariably traumatic scars of our past, in those invisible threads that connect us to our first world, the world of family, school, playground, first social contacts. Imagine a child, a being not yet constrained by conventions, unburdened by others' expectations, pure, unadulterated life energy boils within them. Their ambition is not a thirst for power, but a genuine desire for growth, to explore their limits, to master the world. They want to be first, fastest, bravest, and there is not an ounce of malice in this, only an impulse to unleash their potential. Their healthy aggression is not violence, but a natural ability to assert their boundaries, protect their space, to say no to what is alien or harmful to them. It is a strength that allows them to be themselves, not to dissolve into others' desires. Their spontaneity is a free dance of the soul, knowing no fear of judgment, ready to err, fall, and immediately rise, learning through direct experience. And their vulnerability is not weakness, but openness to the world, the ability to trust, to love, and be loved without protective masks. However, this untouched garden of the soul too soon encounters the harsh climate of society. Too often, pure ambition is met with condemnation. Don't stand out. Be like everyone else. That's selfishness. And so the desire for uniqueness begins to seem shameful, and the impulse for greatness, sinful pride, healthy aggression, manifesting as persistence or self-defense, is perceived as disobedience, rudeness, impoliteness. Children are taught to be good, convenient, non-confrontational, suppressing their natural self-defense mechanism. The right to make mistakes, without which true learning is impossible, becomes a luxury and then a taboo altogether. Every fall is accompanied not by support, but by reproach, ridicule, punishment. You've ruined everything again. And so the fear of imperfection paralyzes any endeavor. Vulnerability, that bridge to genuine intimacy, is perceived as a weakness that must not be shown, because real men don't cry and strong women don't show their feelings. Thus, step by step, under the pressure of others' fears, expectations, and prejudices, these precious qualities, these living, pulsating aspects of our soul were forced to retreat. They did not disappear without a trace. They were exiled from consciousness, from active participation in our lives, locked in the dark closet of the unconscious. They became our internal exiles, those parts of ourselves that were once rejected, devalued, cornered, and have since lived in the shadows awaiting their moment. These are not just forgotten memories. They are living, breathing entities whose energy, finding no outlet, continues to press from within, giving rise to inexplicable anxiety, self-sabotage, or conversely, uncontrollable outbursts of the very thing that was suppressed. Their exile is a tragedy, for along with them, we lost access to immense power, to the spontaneous joy of being, to the ability to create and love without hesitation. However, even in exile, they do not cease to knock on the door of our consciousness, sometimes through painful symptoms, sometimes through an inexplicable attraction to those who dare to live these qualities. They strive to return home into the embrace of a whole personality, and sometimes manifest in the most unexpected ways. Parts of ourselves, once banished to the desolate lands of the unconscious, do not disappear without a trace. They do not vanish into oblivion, but continue to live there in the shadow, like exiles from a tribe, deprived of the right to return, yet still connected by invisible, energetic threads to their native land. These internal outcasts, these rejected aspects of our soul, continue to pulsate on the periphery of consciousness, becoming a source of hidden tension and inexplicable anxiety. Their energy, like an unpaid bill, does not dissipate into the air. It accumulates, grows, demanding attention and return. And if it does not find an outlet within, through awareness and integration, it inevitably breaks out, manifesting in the most unexpected and, as a rule, irrationally irritating forms, becoming a persistent reminder of our internal debt. Every time we feel inexplicable frustration at someone's excessive self-confidence or irrational aversion to someone's unceremonious expression, we are, in essence, encountering the phantom pains of our own suppressed gifts. That unrestrained ambition that so strongly bothers us in another is not their vice, but our own sealed vault of daring aspirations, locked in the prison of caution. That wild, unceremonious spontaneity that causes a near physical fit of irritation is our own desire for freedom, boxed in by decorum, fear of judgment that we project outward. Our shadow does not die in exile. It becomes a ghost, haunting us in the distorted reflections of other people, in their words, gestures, in their very essence, which seems so alien and unacceptable to us precisely because it is an integral part of ourselves that we cannot or will not acknowledge. This phenomenon, deeply studied by Carl Gustav Jung and termed projection by him, is nothing less than the psyche's tireless attempt to restore lost wholeness. Like ancient civilizations that chose a scapegoat to symbolically lay all their sins and failures upon, we tend to cast out what we consider unacceptable, shameful, or dangerous to our social self. This external scapegoat becomes the unwitting bearer of our own unwanted truth, the personification of those qualities that we could not or would not accept in ourselves. And that is precisely why its existence evokes such sharp, almost painful rejection, for we see in it not its true essence, but merely a distorted mirror of our own unrecognized traits, a manifestation of that inner strength that we forbade ourselves to express. This mechanism, while protecting our ego from discomfort, deprives us of access to colossal inner energy, to the source of our uniqueness and vitality. The stronger the projection, the more powerful the suppressed energy that yearns to break free, seeking to be noticed, acknowledged, and finally integrated into the unified whole of the personality. These external irritants are not accidental. They are like unceasing lighthouses, pointing to the treasures buried under layers of judgment and fear. Behind every such projection, behind every internal exile, lies colossal potential, energy capable of transforming life, bringing unprecedented creativity, genuine spontaneity, and unrestrained vitality. But to unleash it, it is necessary to stop looking for external culprits and look inward at those images that so persistently try to break into our consciousness, embodying themselves in the most unexpected guises and sometimes causing completely irrational reactions in us. In the labyrinth of mental reflections, where the brightest lights shine on our virtues, shadows inevitably emerge, places where we have banished everything that seemed unacceptable, inconvenient, or dangerous. And now, when these exiles take on flesh and blood in others, in the world around us, our unconscious reacts with a burst of irrational aversion. This is not just antipathy, it is the phantom pain of our own once rejected gifts. They come to us in the guise of those whom we are sometimes ready to brand, not understanding the true reason for our irritation. Allow me to outline a few such archetypes whose presence in our field of vision causes an inexplicable itch, an internal protest, an almost physical repulsion. The first is the arrogant upstart. This is someone who shamelessly claims attention, who dares to say, "I want," where you've learned to be silent, who isn't ashamed to take center stage, even if they don't have obvious rights to it. They easily interrupt, boldly express their opinion, even if it goes against the accepted norm, and seem to always get their way without putting in the effort you're accustomed to. Their self-confidence, bordering on impudence, stirs a storm of indignation within you. How dare they? Why do they get away with everything? In their behavior, you see the embodiment of everything you were forbidden, punished for, taught to suppress in yourself: ambition, spontaneous audacity, the right to be heard without prior preparation. Or perhaps you are deeply offended by the unceremonious egoist. This character calmly puts their interests above all else, feeling not the slightest guilt for their own well-being. They are not quick to help if it's not part of their plans, can say no without explanation, and their boundaries are invisible but impregnable walls. They are not afraid to seem unkind, don't care what others think of them, and don't waste energy trying to please everyone. In their independence and self-sufficiency, you see a challenge to your own willingness to sacrifice, your habit of being accommodating, your constant concern for others' opinions. Their freedom from others' expectations seems like callousness to you, when in reality it merely highlights your own suppressed need for healthy self-interest and the right to self-preservation. But perhaps the most striking example is the chaotic creator. Imagine an artist whose studio is embodied disorder, tubes of paint squeezed directly onto the floor, coffee mugs lost among dusty sketches, brushes dried in random places. They themselves are disheveled energy, with paint stains on their hands and in their hair, with eyes burning with a feverish gleam. They might sleep until noon, then work nonstop until dawn, ignoring all routines, deadlines, and decorum. Their speech is a stream of associations, their movements abrupt and unpredictable. I knew such a person. His name was Mark. He was a brilliant sculptor, but his life was the absolute antithesis of order. His house was like Ali Baba's cave, where treasures mingled with trash. He might forget an appointment with a gallerist because he got engrossed in a sudden idea, or disappear for a week to find that perfect piece of marble in an abandoned quarry. My friend who tried to collaborate with him was meticulous, scrupulous, living by a schedule. He constantly complained about Mark. He's irresponsible. He's disorganized. How can anyone work like that? It's chaos. Yet, he couldn't take his eyes off Mark's creations. They were alive, daring, poignant. They screamed of freedom and authenticity. My friend didn't understand that his irrational irritation was not merely a reaction to disorder, but the phantom pain of his own, once irretrievably suppressed spontaneity, a wild, untamed creativity that could create without regard for rules and conventions. He saw in Mark what he had forbidden himself, the right to chaos as a source of a higher order. These demons, these external irritants, they carry not just a reflection, but an indication of that strength, that creativity, that spontaneity that was exiled from your conscious life. They are like lighthouses, illuminating the path to your own buried treasures. For what seems repulsive to you in another is often a distorted but powerful manifestation of what you once rejected in yourself, not realizing what valuable ability or right you denied yourself. We have already journeyed through the labyrinth of projections where the ghosts of our unaccepted qualities dance in others' guises, causing a vague, irrational irritation within us. Now it is time to draw back the veil and view these demons not as creations of darkness, but as distorted reflections of our most powerful gifts. For every aspect that we have so desperately banished into the dark corners of the psyche is, in fact, a sealed treasure whose true nature has been distorted by fear and misunderstanding. The shadow is not a dump of vices, but rather a carefully hidden treasury where we ourselves, out of fear of their untamed power, have imprisoned our brightest facets. Recall the arrogant upstart who caused you such irrational aversion, that dull irritation pulsating beneath your skin? What if their arrogance is merely a crude, unrefined form of your own suppressed ambition? That ambition that strives for light, for recognition, for leadership, for the realization of the boldest plans. Perhaps you exiled into the shadow not arrogance, but the right to be seen, the right to speak up, the right to take center stage in your own life when your inner truth demands it, without a tormenting sense of guilt. You forbade yourself to shine, fearing condemnation for excessive brilliance, for immodesty, and thereby deprived yourself of a powerful engine capable of leading you to heights, to the embodiment of your unique mission. This is not audacity, but unaccepted courage to be fully yourself, an unwavering belief in your own worth that does not need external approval, that inner strength that allows you to forge new paths where others see only obstacles. Or consider the unceremonious egoist, one who seemed to know no bounds or others' feelings, who shamelessly put themselves first. In their unceremoniousness, like in a raw diamond, lies the pure, primal force of self-preservation and authenticity. This is not malevolence, but a desperate, sometimes clumsy, attempt to assert their boundaries, to express true needs without regard for the world's expectations, for the endless parade of shoulds. You perhaps exiled into the shadow the right to healthy egocentricity, not the kind that destroys connections and relationships, but the kind that builds, allowing you to be true to yourself, to protect your inner world, and to set priorities based on your own integrity and well-being. This is the right to say no without guilt, the right to be authentic, not convenient, without sacrificing yourself for illusory approval. This is the ability for healthy autonomy to assert oneself in the world without dissolving into others' desires. Preserving one's unique form and energy. And finally, the chaotic creator, that very sculptor mark, whose unpredictability and spontaneity horrified his meticulous friend, causing him fits of perfectionist despair. In this chaos beats the pulse of true creativity, unconstrained by frameworks and rules, unfettered by logic and plan. This is not disorder, but freedom of thought, intuitive movement, a willingness to break conventions for the birth of something new, unseen. You likely exiled into the shadow your spontaneity, your ability to improvise, your yearning for non-linear thinking, fearing being considered unreliable or unserious, fearing loss of control. You forbade yourself to be unpredictable, alive, fluid, thereby cutting yourself off from the source of genuine inspiration and flexibility, from that inner river that nourishes all that is new and unusual. This is not chaos, but the dance of intuition, an unpredictable flow of genius, allowing one to go beyond the conventional and create something truly unique, something that could not have been planned. This is the right to play, to experiment, to err as an integral part of the creative process, the right to be imperfect but alive. In each of these cases, we see not a vice but suppressed strength, not a flaw but an exiled gift. We didn't merely reject an unpleasant trait from our perspective. We amputated a part of ourselves, renouncing a valuable ability or an inherent right that could enrich our lives and lead to wholeness. The shadow thus appears not as a prison for our sins, but rather as a treasure chest where we ourselves, out of fear of their power, have confined our brightest facets, our primal, untamed forces. These are sealed rivers whose current, instead of nourishing fertile lands and giving life, now causes only subterranean tremors and internal tensions in the depths of our psyche. By rejecting these aspects, we do not become purer or more perfect. We merely become smaller, depriving ourselves of access to a colossal internal resource that could fuel our development, our joy, our authentic self-realization, and lead us to true freedom of being. The irony is that it is precisely this constant self-denial, this voluntary internal exile that gives rise to the very internal struggle, those invisible chains that hold us back from full realization. It manifests not in dramatic crises, but in barely perceptible yet destructive forms of sabotage, in stubborn creative blocks, in an inability to show spontaneity at the right moment, in making disadvantageous decisions, hindering the use of that suppressed power, creativity, and spontaneity that await their hour. Previous discussions touched upon the phantom limb, the subtle pain of what was once whole, now severed and exiled from the conscious self. We merely glimpse the mechanisms by which we project our inner exiles onto the canvas of the external world, seeing in others the very energies we rejected deep within ourselves. But what happens when these unacknowledged fragments, these powerful, untamed forces, remain locked away, festering in the dark corners of the psyche? What price do we pay for this self-imposed amputation, for this refusal to acknowledge the full spectrum of our inner landscape? Consider the artist whose canvas stubbornly remains blank, not from a lack of inspiration, but from an insidious fear. Perhaps in childhood, their wild, unrestrained brush strokes were met with condemnation, labeled chaos, disorder. And now, when the creative impulse calls for courage, for stepping beyond the familiar, an internal censor forged from those old reproaches paralyzes the hand. They fear that if they unleash this chaotic creator, they will become uncontrollable, irresponsible, like those demons from forgotten chapters whose spontaneity seemed destructive. This is not just a block. It is an act of self-sabotage, where suppressed creativity, instead of becoming wings, turns into invisible chains, hindering the manifestation of a genuine gift. Or take the person standing on the threshold of a significant decision, changing jobs, starting a new project, entering a relationship. Energy boils within them, a thirst for novelty, a daring ambition that they once branded as audacity or selfishness, seeing it in others and hastily rejecting it. Now, when these qualities could be a driving force, pushing them forward, they choose the path of least resistance, the safest, most predictable one. They are afraid of sticking out, of being too noticeable, too loud, because in their subconscious, these manifestations are associated with some inner monster that was once condemned. This fear of showing healthy assertiveness, necessary for growth, becomes an invisible barrier, leading to decisions that benefit not them, but their fear, decisions that doom them to stagnation, depriving them of the opportunity to use their suppressed power. A third example, a person whose life seems perfectly planned, meticulously arranged. They pride themselves on their discipline, their predictability, but beneath this polished surface lies suppressed spontaneity, once called recklessness, frivolity. They cannot allow themselves a sudden trip, an unexpected impulse, or even a playful improvisation. Their inner life lacks a vital breath, for every spontaneous impulse is immediately suppressed as a potential threat to order, as a precursor to chaos. They fear that if they let go of the reins for even a moment, they will turn into that chaotic creator whose freedom seemed irresponsible to them. The irony is that precisely this rigid inflexibility deprives them of adaptability, the ability to adjust to a changing world, transforming potential spontaneity into shackles. At this moment, a persistent question, a whisper of anxiety might arise within you. But what if my shadow is not suppressed creativity or ambition, but something truly dark? Anger, envy, jealousy, aren't these evils that need to be suppressed, not integrated? This is a valid concern rooted in age-old notions of good and evil. However, let's look at this from a different angle. Anger, in its pure, undistorted form, is energy, a signal of boundary violation, of injustice. Suppressed anger with no outlet can indeed transform into destructive rage, self-sabotage, or passive aggression that corrodes from within. But anger, when conscious and directed, becomes a powerful engine for change, an ability to stand up for oneself, to defend one's values. Envy, if not demonized, can be a pointer to our own unfulfilled desires, to what we value and strive for. Jealousy, at its core, can speak of the fear of loss, of the value of relationships we fear losing. None of these feelings are inherently evil. They are merely raw, unprocessed energy. The problem arises not in their presence, but in our fear of them, in their suppression, which deprives us of the ability to consciously manage them and utilize their hidden potential. The shadow is not a repository of vices. It is rather a treasure chest where, alongside diamonds, lie unpolished stones. The art lies not in discarding everything that seems ugly, but in learning to polish, to shape, to integrate. Every time we refuse to acknowledge these aspects, we don't just lose a part of ourselves, we cut off access to a colossal reservoir of energy. We deprive ourselves of the spontaneity that enlivens life, the creativity that builds worlds, and that primal strength that allows us to assert ourselves, overcome obstacles, and realize dreams. Instead of being whole, we move through life with an invisible brake, constantly checking an internal list of what not to do, afraid to step into. Territory marked as dangerous, too much, unacceptable. The irony is that precisely this fear, this attempt to be convenient or right in the eyes of long-gone critics, generates true discomfort, true disharmony. We are not just avoiding evil, we are avoiding our fullness, our potential, our right to be. Sometimes in our desire to avoid encountering what seems monstrous to us, we make another no less subtle mistake. We begin to see those same qualities, but already polished and socially acceptable in others, in those we praise, imitate, put on a pedestal. We admire their strength, their daring, their overt creativity, their ease and spontaneity. We see in them the embodiment of what we believe can never be ours, not realizing that this is just another, more sophisticated mirror reflecting our own unexpressed gifts. We have discussed those who evoke an irrational aversion in us, whose traits seemingly repel us, but in reality merely mirror our own rejected facets. However, there's another side to this coin, no less insidious in its beauty, those who inspire an irresistible admiration within us. Here, we approach one of the most subtle and paradoxical concepts, the golden shadow. Imagine a person whose creative power seems boundless to you, whose spontaneity is a pure, untamed force and whose ability to assert their will is almost superhuman. You look at them and a wave of reverence, almost envy, mixed with genuine adoration rises within you. You say, wow, what talent. I wish I could be like that. And at that very moment, as you sacrifice your inner power at the altar of another's greatness, you unknowingly commit an act of self-sabotage. You are projecting onto another person your own unrealized yet dormant gifts. This is the golden shadow, a treasure trove of your potentials that for some reason, you do not allow yourself to express. Why do we act this way? Why do we give away to another what is ours by right of birth? Often, this stems from false modesty, from a fear of our own grandeur, of the sheer volume of power, creativity, or spontaneity we feel within ourselves but are afraid to unleash. Perhaps in childhood, we were taught that being too bright, too bold, too original meant being a show-off, selfish, or eccentric. And so years later, instead of claiming these qualities for ourselves, we turn them into idols we worship but dare not touch. This projection of admiration is a subtle yet powerful form of self-alienation. Every time you see an ideal in someone and sigh, I wish I could be like that, you're not just admiring, you're giving away a piece of yourself. You deprive yourself of the chance to become who you already are deep down. You build barriers between yourself and your true nature, turning potential into an unreachable dream. Your capacity for boundless creativity, your innate courage, your natural spontaneity, all of it awaits being acknowledged and integrated. But as long as these aspects remain outside in someone else's hands, they cannot serve you. These very qualities that you so generously attribute to others are your inner exiles, that part of your soul that was separated and forgotten. They are not bad, like those aspects of the shadow that cause repulsion. On the contrary, they are your brightest diamonds, your golden heritage. But exile is exile, regardless of what is exiled, darkness or light. And the task is to bring these exiles home into the fold of your consciousness, to restore their rights, and to allow them to shine in your own life. This is not just a return of suppressed power. It is a return to your wholeness, your authentic, unadulterated essence. Imagine if all the energy you spend admiring others' achievements on creating these external idols could be directed inward toward unleashing your own potential. This doesn't mean you stop appreciating others, but that you start appreciating yourself equally, recognizing that all the qualities you love in others already exist within you, perhaps in a dormant state. Your shadow is not just a container for what seems undesirable, but also a repository of your most valuable yet unclaimed gifts. True power begins not with imitation, but with appropriation. It is a path not outward, but inward to the sources of your own light, to that which has always awaited its moment to manifest. So, we have reached a point where the old maps of the world crumble into dust, and in their place emerges a new, astonishing geography of the soul. The shadow is not a curse, but a prophecy. Not a dump of vices, but a treasure trove, sealed by fear and ignorance. The return of this power is not an act of capitulation to the base, but true alchemy, transforming the lead of suppression into the gold of living pulsating energy. The essence is to end the exile. If you see an unstoppable ambition bordering on ruthlessness in someone else and it causes you repulsion, ask yourself, isn't your own capacity for purposefulness, for healthy aggression necessary for breakthroughs hidden behind this facade, locked away? If you are captivated by someone's boundless creativity, aren't you thereby acknowledging your own right to spontaneity, to unbridled self-expression, which you might have once been afraid to show? This doesn't mean becoming an arrogant upstart or a tactless egoist. It means extracting the primordial, pure power from these distorted projections, the right to be heard, to assert your boundaries, to create without seeking external approval. It is reclaiming your sovereign right to be whole with all your facets, even those that seem sharp or inconvenient. Integration is not the assimilation of darkness, but its illumination of those parts of yourself that were left in oblivion. It is a dance between light and shadow, where each step leads to greater harmony, not chaos. How to begin this process, how to bring back the exiles. I propose a simple yet profound practice, which we will call the mirror of reflections. For a week, carefully observe your reactions to others. Identify one person or situation that evokes a particularly strong emotional response, whether it's sharp irritation, envy, or conversely, admiration, almost reverence. Then in silence, ask yourself these questions. What specific qualities of this person or situation trigger such a reaction? Try to be as honest as possible. If it's irritation, what precisely about their behavior irks you? Their audacity, their confidence, their unruliness? If it's admiration, what exactly draws you in so much? Their talent, their freedom, their wisdom? After noting these qualities, turn your gaze inward. Where and when in my life have I suppressed these qualities? Where have I denied myself the right to be audacious, confident, unruly? Or where have I not allowed my talent, my freedom, my inner wisdom to manifest? Allow yourself to feel this suppressed energy. Imagine it returning to you like a wave that has finally found its shore. Do not judge it. Simply accept it. Next step, how can I constructively manifest this energy in my life right now? If it was suppressed ambition, how can I take the first step toward my goal without fear of being too much? If it was suppressed spontaneity, how can I allow myself to act without a predefined plan, trusting my intuition? Start small with one action that allows this reawakened force to take shape. It could be a bold word, an unconventional choice, or a refusal of something imposed on you. Each such act is a step toward wholeness, toward gaining true power. Remember, this work with the shadow is not an end in itself, but a means to achieve wholeness, to unlock inexhaustible inner resources. When you stop fighting your own exiles, when you restore their place at the table of your consciousness, you don't just become a better version of yourself. You become your true self, who you were originally intended to be before all distortions and compromises. And this rebirth is merely a prelude to something much greater. For when a person achieves inner wholeness, they begin to hear the call of their true purpose, to feel the pulse of that grand story they are meant to write. There are aspects of this story that extend far beyond the individual I, and these are precisely what await their moment to be revealed.